Hello family, how are you today? This is Sarah. I'm here with Remy. He's 14 months. I wanted to give an open discussion about something that a lot of women go through, but not a lot of them actually talk about afterward. But not many people actually discuss it once it happens to you. And that discussion is breastfeeding and what happens when breastfeeding fails. To give a little background on my story, when I found my husband, I remember saying to myself, I'm going to have a natural birth, I'm going to breastfeed, I'm going to breastfeed until my child says no to breastfeeding. So after we got married, after Gui finished boot camp and AIT and we moved to Fort Bragg, we decided to start a family, and then I got pregnant, and then I tried to have as natural as a pregnancy as possible. So then when it came time and closer to his birth, we found out that he was breech and he couldn't turn. They tried to do a version where they turn him from the outside and he wouldn't turn, so they scheduled a C-section. And I remember reading beforehand how C-sections can cause problems in breastfeeding. And so I said to myself, whatever, it's gonna be fine. I'll just work through them. I took the breastfeeding classes, I talked to lactation consultants, I read so many blogs, I watched so many YouTube videos on how to breastfeed, the right latches, whatnot. Then it came time for my C-section. On the day of my C-section, I was told that I could not do skin to skin in the OR, and that really upset me. In the OR, I had multiple complications. I had an anxiety attack because I didn't like the way that my legs felt heavy and I couldn't move them. I had some bleeding. Remy was perfectly fine and healthy. He was born 8 pounds, 21.5 inches long. He's still to this day super healthy and awesome. Then when I came out of the OR and we went into the recovery room and he latched, but it wasn't that great of a latch. I remember feeling a lot of pain and asking the nurse, is this how it's supposed to feel? And she said, oh yeah, you're fine. Then he fell asleep and he didn't wake up for a few hours, which is normal for newborns. And then when I attempted to feed him again, I felt the same pain. And something I noticed about Remy that I was not prepared for was that he would cry all the time. But a newborn, hello, newborns are supposed to cry, right? They're not. I later learned that newborns are supposed to eat and sleep, especially the first day or two of their life. Eat and sleep. He would cry and cry. So I would constantly put him back on and latch him and attempt to feed him, and I would feel more and more pain. A few lactation consultants came in and out of the room throughout my stay in the hospital, and they said, try different positions. It was always the same. Nothing really changed. I went home and I remember feeling such despair, like emptiness. They don't really prepare you for the type of feelings you'll have once you come home with your newborn. It was beyond fear. It was more like I didn't know what to do with my life next. You know, I spent so much time preparing myself to have a baby, but I wasn't sure how I was going to feel. So I remember wondering, why is he constantly crying? Why won't he settle down? Why won't he just feed? He would like latch on, feed, unlatch, latch on, feed, unlatch, and he would just, when he would unlatch, he would just wail and cry and cry. And so I remember just being so unhappy, and I remember crying on the phone to one of my friends who just had her baby, and I was wondering, what am I going to do? He's not eating for me. And then I think it was the second night home. It was the night before we took him for his very first checkup, and I spent hours nursing him all night long, and he would just cry on and off, and I remember hearing hunger pangs. Like, I remember, you know, that sound? I heard it from him. I got a pump from my insurance. I hooked it up. I started to pump. I barely got anything. I'm talking like drops, but enough. I want to say maybe half an ounce. And I remember looking at that, and I remember looking at him, and then I couldn't take it. I took a bottle, I put the milk in the bottle, and then I put it in his mouth, and I remember the look on his face, this feeling of just absolute relief, and he looked up at me, and it was almost like I could see his personality for the very first time. And I remember feeling relieved, but then I remember at that exact moment feeling like a complete failure. And I looked up at my husband and I said, why won't he feed for me? Why won't he eat? Why is he eating from this bottle? What's wrong with me? So after he drank from that bottle, I put him back on the breast. He fell asleep within 20-30 seconds. So then he finally slept for like a couple hours. We woke up. I tried feeding him again. We brought him to the doctor. He was screaming, crying the entire time. And then there's this questionnaire that you fill out at the doctors for postpartum depression. And I remember checking off like yes to like almost all of them. And then the doctor said to me, Mom, you need to see somebody, so I'm gonna come and get a social worker to talk to you, because you checked off yes and your score's a little high on this postpartum depression questionnaire. And I'm like, okay. So I remember talking to the social worker, telling her he won't feed. I just don't know what to do, so I feel despair. So she said, listen, it sounds like you're having more breastfeeding problems than depression problems. So they bring in a lactation consultant. I talk with a lactation consultant, and we do some weighted feeds. We weighed him before he fed, then we weighed him after he fed. And it was like, it wasn't even a difference. It was like barely a difference. So we found out he wasn't getting anything from me. He wasn't transferring any milk. And the solution, she said, was formula. And I'm not bashing anybody that uses formula. Hey, fed is best. If your baby is fed, that is what is important. But I remember thinking to myself, I can't give formula. I mean, I would have to, but I couldn't. So then I remember one of my friends has done donor milk. And donor milk, which means you give breast milk that's pumped from another mother. And then I said to the lactation consultant, what about donor breast milk? And so she said, well, I'm not supposed to recommend it, but I do know somebody that has extra frozen breast milk that can possibly give to you. Let me ask her. Later that day, we got the breast milk, and the lactation consultant told me to feed him about an ounce to an ounce and a half every 3 hours. But then after I feed him, I'm supposed to also put him to the breast. Each boob, I think it was like 10 minutes each boob, and then I'm supposed to record everything, and then I was supposed to pump. So literally it was like he would feed for me, then I would feed him from a bottle, then I would pump, and so it would take like 30 to 45 minutes. And then like an hour later, it was time to do everything all over again. So it was every 2 hours during the day, and then every 3 to 4 hours at night. But it was like I couldn't go anywhere. I was trapped to the pump. I was always conscious of how much I was making, which, by the way, only increased a little bit. I think at the most I would create 1 ounce on one breast and like a half an ounce on the other breast. And by the time he was a week old, he was drinking about 3 ounces every single feeding. So I would have to continually supplement with donor breast milk. And then it got to a point where he would prefer the bottle. He wouldn't prefer actually breastfeeding. And to be honest, who would blame him? barely anything was coming out of the breast, but like in the bottle it's a free-flowing amount of milk. It tastes great, so why not? So eventually it got to a point where if I even brought him close to my breasts, he would just scream. But I brought a bottle to his face and he would happily just drink from it. And during that time, of course I bonded with him and I loved him and I had this maternal instinct with him, but I wasn't happy because I literally felt every single day I was a failure, because I would go outside and I would have these bottles I would have to take with me. I would have all this equipment I would have to take with me. I would take my pump with me. I would have to go into the car and pump on the time that I needed to. I was afraid to feed him in public because I was afraid that people would think that I was a failure for having to feed him from a bottle. Like, what is this mother doing with her newborn drinking from a bottle? And the funny thing is, like, I always thought to myself I wouldn't have that issue. And most women, they don't think to themselves they're gonna have that issue. They think it's natural. Like, you're gonna give birth to a baby and then you're gonna make milk and the baby's gonna drink from your breast and everything's gonna be great. But it doesn't work like that all the time. It just doesn't. And I don't feel like many women are prepared to hear that or even prepared to realize that it could come true to them. So I wasn't prepared. And it all came crashing down over a period of times. I want to say until he was like a month old. He was a month old. I would still do this routine. And I remember the lactation consultant telling me, I think you may have insufficient glandular tissue. And I said, you know, that sounds about right, because the amount of milk was not increasing. No matter how many minutes a day I would pump. And she said, you know, you just probably will never be able to fully sustain your child with breast alone. You're gonna, and I felt this like feeling come over me. I'm like, I'm gonna have to get donor milk for his entire first year of life. Like, how the heck am I gonna do this? And I remember feeling panic. I'm like, I don't know that many people with milk. And like, at that time I was getting maybe like 2 or 3 donors, and I was just like, I felt like a drug addict because I was like constantly texting them like, hey, do you have any more milk? Do you have any more milk you can give me? Come on, I need the milk, please give me the milk. And I would like drive almost every other day to get the milk, and we had to get a deep freezer. So I felt this panic come down to me, like, what am I going to do? And the lactation consultant, she looked at me in the eyes and she said, your worth is not measured in ounces. Your worth as a mother is not measured in ounces. It's not. And I felt goosebumps come down my arms, and I just sobbed. And I was like, you know, you're right. It really isn't. When he was 3 months old, I stopped pumping. I got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. But that feeling of despair deep inside, it didn't go away. I didn't treat the trauma that I felt from my C-section, from my struggles with breastfeeding, from my adjustment to becoming a mother. I didn't tackle that. I didn't think to myself, I have to take care of myself as well as taking care of my son and my family. And it's just recently where I let go of that depression and that trauma, where I feel like a different mother. I feel like everything's fine. I feel like everything is great. Nothing is wrong with what happened to my breasts. Nothing is wrong with what happened to my son. And then it took a year, but the trauma of not being able to feed my son ran so deep that it held an aspect on my life that I never thought it would. There really is a symptom where you cannot make milk. You're physically unable to make milk. But nobody talks about that. Nobody. Like, can you imagine taking lactation consultant class, a breastfeeding class before giving birth? And And then there's a whole section of the class where the lactation consultant says, hey, by the way, you could be one of the very small percentage of women that just won't create enough breast milk, but that's okay, and here's how to combat that. There isn't, and there should be. There just should, because there needs to be preparation. Because if I was prepared and knowing that and accepting that before I gave birth, then I don't believe I would have that much depression and sadness throughout the first year of my son's life. And right now, I know my next child, I will have to do this all over again with the breast milk. I will have to basically pump. I will have to give him donor milk. And I'm okay with that. Right now, yeah, I'm okay with that. But when he was born, I wasn't okay with that. And so I want to end this video soon, but I want to end it with a message. Fed is best. Everybody knows that phrase. But again, your worth as a mother is not measured in ounces. There are other ways to feed your child. Breastfeeding is perfect, and I love, and every time I see a woman breastfeeding, even whether in public or a friend that talks about it, I'm like, you're awesome, and it's amazing. Oh, you're fully sustaining your child through your own body. It's awesome. But not everyone can do it. Doesn't matter how many supplements you take. It doesn't matter if you eat oatmeal every single day, every single meal. It doesn't matter if you make lactation consult. It doesn't matter if you make lactation cookies and eat them religiously. It doesn't matter if you drink mother's milk tea. It doesn't matter if you make sure that you don't eat garlic or onions. It doesn't matter if you drink Gatorade, or if you drink water, or if you, I don't know, the other millions of suggestions that I tried and failed at. It doesn't matter if you try all that and it still doesn't work out. It doesn't matter. You tried. You gave. If you gave even an ounce of your own breast milk to your child, you succeeded right there. You did it. You tried. You're amazing. So I want this video for all of the mothers that either before they have their baby or during the whole newborn phase, or even after, if your child's older and you're just listening to this and you're like, hell yeah, I went through the same thing. That's awesome that you did too. We are connecting right now. But I want this message for all of you mothers. Breastfeeding is amazing. It doesn't work out for everybody. It does for a lot of people, which is amazing and awesome, but it doesn't work out for everybody. And if it doesn't work out for you, there are things you could do to help. And if that still doesn't work out for you, there are options. You can have donor breast milk, you can give formula, you can give a mixture of the two if you don't have enough donor breast milk and you top up with some formula. I will probably make another video about donor breast milk, maybe how to store it, how to freeze it, and that could also coincide with like freezing your own breast milk and storing your own breast milk. But my message is clear. You are in control of your child's life. It's your responsibility. You need to be prepared. You need to understand that sometimes it won't always work. And it does work, which is amazing. It didn't work for me. My boobs failed me. And that sucked. And that does still suck. But you know what? And I come to this conclusion. It happens. I have a family. I have a son who is happy and healthy and hitting all of his milestones. He has, I want to say, over a dozen donor breast milk mamas whom I love dearly, who's a part of our lives forever. My family is what matters. I've come to terms with that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure that you like and comment on the video. Share if it meant something for you, or even just share even if you want it to mean something to somebody you know that's pregnant and having a baby. Make sure you subscribe by hitting that button below to join the Pear Tree family. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.